Hello, everyone, and welcome to this taster session in A-Level Religious Studies. I'm Miss Evans, the head of RS here at Coopers, and also in our department we have Mr. Kinnaird, who is the head of RS at Key Stage 3. We have Mr. Hugel, and we also have Mrs. Reid, who some of you may be working with in the future, as she is our academic development coordinator, who largely deals with the Oxford and Cambridge applicants. Okay, so the purpose of this Loom video is, well, three reasons really. Firstly, to introduce the course, to secondly, explain the taster session that we're going to be going through, and thirdly, to explain the summer tasks that you are to complete in preparation for September. Okay, so what will you be studying for A-Level Religious Studies? Now, for A-Level Religious Studies, the course is split into three. So, philosophy, ethics, and development Christian thought. At the end of year 13, you will be sitting 3 exams based on each topic, and you will be expected to answer 3 questions each. So, you'll be answering 3 questions on philosophy, 3 questions on ethics, and so on. The questions will be a mixture of content from year 12 and year 13. So it's important to remember that every year is important as there are no AS papers. Questions are essay style questions, which are mainly about evaluation. So if, for example, you did AQA RS at GCSE, no worries if you didn't, but if you did, they are, I would probably describe them, an extended version of your 12 marker. Okay, so what will you actually be looking at in each topic? So within philosophy, there's a vast amount that you are going to be looking at, but these are just some of the questions that you will be discussing and studying. So questions such as the nature of evil, the nature of God, whether or not we can know for certain that God exists. What do we mean by God? Is it even worthwhile talking about God if God is beyond comprehension? What is real? Is there such a thing as the soul? In ethics, you'll be looking at issues surrounding morality and principles and values. So, looking at whether or not there are actions that are always wrong, no matter the situation, or does morality really depend on the circumstance? Is there a grey area when we talk about right or wrong? What do we mean when we talk about good? Are humans naturally orientated towards the good, or are they actually just flawed? And therefore, we shouldn't strive to be morally good because there's no such thing. And our third topic, developments in Christian thought, is obviously largely around Christianity. So some of the questions you'll be looking at are issues around the afterlife and beliefs in heaven and hell. And if heaven does exist, will everyone go according to Christianity? Or is it just those people that believe in Jesus? Can you still be a Christian and commit murder? We're going to be looking at, in the end of year 12, the person of Bonhoeffer, the life and the theology of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pacifist for the majority of his life, but yet he was involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler. But yet, despite all of that, he still maintained his Christian identity. We're also going to be looking at the person of Jesus. So, was Jesus really divine, or was he just a wise teacher or even a political liberator? So for this session, we are going to be looking at ethics, and that's because that's a session that I would be leading, and I am the ethics teacher in the department alongside Mr. Hugel. So ethics can be kind of split into 2 categories. The first category, which you would be looking at in year 13, is meta-ethics. And this is a really challenging yet interesting topic because meta-ethics seeks to answer deep questions such as, what is the actual word good mean? What does the word bad mean? What do we mean when we say right or wrong? Are they objective words that are universal for everyone, or are they just purely emotional words? What is good depends on my emotions, my feelings, and that explains why what I consider to be good, someone else might consider to be bad. The other branch of ethics is normative, and normative ethics is what you're probably going to be spending the majority of year 12 looking at, tries to establish what is right and wrong. So already under the assumption that there is an idea of what is right and wrong, it's not subjective, by proposing systems for working out how human beings should behave and why. So for example, some systems focus on the act itself, Others will focus on the consequences, and others are hybrid, so they will focus a bit on both or just on the person. So the session that we would have been going through would be to examine the branch of normative ethics in a lot more detail and to discover what is important to you when making moral decisions. Is it the act itself? Is it the consequence? Or is it a mixture of both? Now, this second bullet point, I've said it's the aim of today's session, but this pretty much is going to be the aim of a lot of sessions we do, because ethics really deals with morality and your morals. So you are going to be encouraged to think about your morality throughout this course over the 2 years. Okay, so usually in the taster session, I would show you this clip from Batman's The Dark Knight. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share it with you on this video. So just to briefly introduce this situation. So ethics is all about principles, morality, what you consider to be good or bad, right or wrong. So in this scenario, the Joker puts forward a social experiment. The Joker believes that all human beings are flawed, and he wants to prove it in this experiment. So I'd like you just to imagine that you are on a ferry. Let's just imagine you're on this one. You are just an ordinary civilian, and you are on a ferry with many other ordinary civilians. Not too far away from you is another ferry. Now, this ferry contains prisoners and criminals, or to use the Joker's phrase, Gotham's most wanted scumbag collection. So you've got murderers in there, you've got thieves in there, you've got the worst of the worst in there. Now, the Joker has planted on each ferry a detonator to a bomb, and this bomb is on the other ferry. So you, on the civilian boat, have a detonator that could blow up the prisoner's boat. The prisoners have a detonator to a bomb that's on your boat that could blow up your boat. And the Joker presents a choice to both ferries. He says that you can blow up the other boat before they blow you up. If no one presses the detonator before midnight, so if neither boat decides to blow up the boat, the Joker will blow up both boats at midnight. So the big question is, you on the civilian boat, do you press the detonator that will blow up the prisoner's boat, or do you not at all? But you know that the Joker is going to blow up both boats by midnight. So usually I would encourage you to watch this clip, and I would press pause at 2 minutes in, and we would discuss what would you do? What factors would influence your decision? So do you press the detonator? Is self-preservation an important factor in your decision making? Is self-preservation so important that it can happen at any cost? So it's okay to preserve your life even if it's the cost of someone else's. As the fact that the boat contains criminals, does that influence your decision? Would your decision differ if perhaps it was another ferry, but this time instead of criminals, it was civilians? Does the action of actually pressing the detonator make you personally responsible for the deaths of the prisoners? Or is the Joker to blame? So this is what we would have been doing in this session, like really exploring your values, really exploring what's important to you, and looking at why making moral decisions isn't always straightforward. So what I would love you to do is for you to watch this clip and actually discuss this with your family and your friends. So watch it and perhaps have a chat with your sibling or your parents or your carer and just discuss what you would do in that situation. And I think you might be surprised by what people might say. And after you've discussed it and you've decided what you would do, I then want you to watch the rest of the clip and then consider, well, what do you think about the prisoner's actions and what does this experiment tell us about moral decision making? And hopefully you might realize that moral decision making isn't necessarily an easy task because it deals with a range of factors. Okay, so the next part of the session that I would like you to do is to read through the information that I believe is going to be attached and answer the questions provided. The reading will the reading is from a page that looks like this, and as I said, hopefully it will be attached. I just want to go through the brief outline of this text just to kind of provide some context behind what you're going to be reading. And essentially, from this reading, I want you to come out with 3 key terms. And these terms are deontology, and this means that morality is based on the action. In other words, an action is good because the action itself is good. There's an intrinsic value that actions have. So telling the truth is always going to be good, no matter the situation. Therefore, telling a lie is always going to be wrong because the act of telling a lie is wrong. So deontology is all about the acts. Acts themselves have goodness and badness attributed to it. So acts that have goodness attributed to it would perhaps be charity, could be honesty, could be justice, friendship, etc. Actions or values that perhaps are attributed with badness would be lying, stealing, cheating, killing, because the act itself is wrong. So a deontologist generally is described as being quite clear cut in what their values are. So perhaps the dilemma for the Joker social experiment wouldn't be that difficult because it would be wrong to press the detonator because it is wrong to take someone's life. So even if the situation is really complicated, a deontologist would say, what is the action that I'm being asked to do? And if the action itself is bad, then I'm not going to do it. On the other hand, you also have teleology. Now, this approach is the complete opposite to deontology. Teleology is all about the consequences. So, what is good isn't based on the act itself, but it's based on what the act produces. So, what does the act result in? So, a deontologist will say murder is always wrong. Well, a teleologist will say, well, what if murder would bring about the greatest good for the greatest number? What if you had to, this is a classic ethics example, but what if you had to kill someone to save 10 people? A deontologist would say it doesn't matter what the consequences are, the action of killing is always wrong. Whereas a teleologist would say, because again, we're focusing on consequence, yes, it's a bad thing to kill, but actually, really, we're doing the right thing because the consequences are far greater if we kill that one person to save 10 or 100. And thirdly, we have a hybrid. Now, a hybrid approach to morality can be a mixture of both. Perhaps a hybrid might say there are certain actions that are always going to be wrong in most situations. However, there are certain actions perhaps that might not necessarily have intrinsic value, and therefore we need to look at the consequences. Okay, so for part of the session, I want you to hopefully watch this clip. If I can go back, watch this clip, discuss this with your family and friends, discuss what you would do, and then watch the remainder and find out what did the people in the civilian vote actually decide. And then I want you to read through this information and answer these questions in the comprehension box here. Okay, then the next part, and I love this, and I'm gutted that I can't be there with you to kind of discuss it and just hear your opinions. I've created this personality quiz. I was a child of the 90s, so a lot of magazines that I read when I was younger had these personality quizzes which said, which is like, I don't know, your spirit animal, or who would be your celebrity boyfriend, or that kind of stuff. And you had to answer these questions. And if you got all A's or if you got all B's, I don't know, your celebrity crush would be Johnny Depp or someone like that. I've taken this personality quiz and turned it into a bit more of an academic personality quiz. So in pairs, and again, this is something perhaps you can do with your family at home. This is kind of great dinner table conversation. I want you to fill out the personality quiz and I will reveal the answers. So the personality quiz here, you are going to have a range of ethical scenarios and you are to work out for each scenario, what would you do? So, for example, your friend has brought you the most hideous present for your birthday. Imagine it's a jumper that's knitted and it is like the worst colour in the world. She asks you for your honest opinion. So, do you A, tell her the truth, as it's the right thing to do? She did ask for your honest opinion, and telling the truth, according to A, is always the right thing to do. Do you B, lie and tell her that it's a lovely present, even though you don't think it is? You're better off lying, as there won't be any tears and tantrums as a result if you told the truth. Or do you C, tell her a lie, but for a different reason? Generally, you disagree with lying, but in this particular situation, it's just a white lie, and you don't want to hurt her feelings, and you want to be a good friend. So you're to go through each scenario and highlight or tick which response you would pick. And then once you've gone through all of that, and again, I'd love it if you spent time and discussed this with your family and your friends, I would then like you to go back and you will find out the answers. I'm going to go through it quite quickly because I don't want you to see just yet. Okay, so that's the taster sessions in a nutshell. I'd like to now talk about the summer tasks. Now, there are 3 summer tasks that we would like you to complete. And again, this sheet will be attached. And majority of the tasks are philosophy based because the taster session is largely ethics based. So we only want to give you 1 ethics task and 2 philosophy, so we can kind of balance it out and show that there's no favoritism, even though I prefer ethics. So what I would like you to do, so for task 1, you are to read, if I can find it. Here we are. You are to read 7 pages from this chapter, and it's an introduction chapter into ethics. This is a great starting point for A-level study, and it's a really simple text. And at the end of it, you've also got a summary of what you've read. So if you're a bit unsure about what you've read, you can always look at the summary, which reduces what you've read into clear bullet points, which I think are really great. So you're to read through this information and complete the tasks identified on the sheet. The next task, I believe, is for you to listen to a podcast, which again we've attached it to. It's a BBC podcast all about Plato, and Plato is one of the first philosophers that you are going to be studying at A level. So I want you to listen to the podcast and answer these questions. And in the RS department, we do encourage you listening to podcasts, reading as much as you can, because we think it's a really good way to learn information. So I recommend you watching this and answering the questions. And the questions are all in chronological order. So if you feel like you've missed one, you can rewind the podcast and go back. And the third transition task, if I can remember rightly, is yes, for you to create a profile of an ancient Greek philosopher. Now, you can decide to pick Plato because you've learned a bit more about Plato from listening to the podcast, or you can decide to look at Socrates, who is an older philosopher, or Aristotle. All of these philosophers you will be looking at the very, very first term of year 12. So again, they're really important figures. And we've provided some websites in which you can find information about them. So task 1 is to read through the chapter, introducing ethics in a bit more detail and introducing what I would describe are the essential key terms surrounding ethics. Task 2 is to listen to the BBC podcast, and again, we've got the link here, and answering the questions on the worksheet. And then task 3, which requires a bit more creativity on your part, is to create a profile on one of the ancient Greek philosophers. With task 3, it's really important that you don't just copy and paste information. Copy and pasting, and I don't want to sound like pessimistic, but copying and pasting doesn't necessarily prove anything. It doesn't show anything apart from you are able to right click on a mouse, and it doesn't show me how well you know that philosopher. So we have carefully picked these websites for you to read through, but perhaps use that detail and just rewrite the information in your own words in a way that makes sense. And it can be bullet points. It doesn't have to be lots of detail, but please try and avoid copying and pasting, because sometimes we can see where students have used vocabulary which they don't understand. And it's really important that you spend time learning, spend time perhaps even defining some of these complicated key terms, and therefore your profile will be more insightful, in my opinion. Okay, so those are the summer tasks for you to complete. Let's go back onto this PowerPoint. Okay, so we've gone through the nature of the course briefly. We've gone through the taster session, so what we would have done in class, and I really hope that you do go through it. And we've gone through the summer tasks. Now, we are dealing with topics that are challenging, not only on an academic level, but on a personal level, because by nature of this course, you are going to be examining and also discovering your beliefs, your values, and your philosophy, what you believe about the nature of the world, the nature of life, or the purpose of it, if there is any at all. And for many of you, it will be challenging, but it will be gratifying, I promise you. Sadly, there are some people that probably don't appreciate this because it deals with questions that cannot be answered in a way that is universal for everyone. So if you look at the screen, questions such as, how do we know God exists? Will everyone go to heaven if there is a heaven? Are there some acts that are always wrong? There's not a clear-cut answer that is universally accepted for everyone. And some people find that difficult. However, despite that being difficult, and despite the subject being, I would say, very unlike other subjects, it is such a worthwhile subject, in my opinion. And I want to end it on this quote. And it summarizes really why I think ethics and philosophy and studying religions is really important. Because even though these questions of what is good, is there a life after death, and so on, even though these questions have been around for a long time and they can't be answered, the fact that they're there shows its importance. And this quote from Michael Sandel, who is one of the most popular professors at Harvard University, he summarizes it far more eloquently than I ever can. So he says this: it's true that these questions have been debated for a very long time, but the very fact that they have recurred and persisted may suggest that though they're impossible in one sense, they are unavoidable in another. And the reason they're unavoidable and inescapable is that we live some answer to these questions every day. So you're going to be entering A level with some answers, some challenges, some questions, but hopefully you'll be able to engage because we're going to be engaging with this in our everyday life. So I hope that you will enjoy going through the taster sessions and the summer tasks, and I hope that you will enjoy even more your time at Cooper's studying our subject. Thank you.